It doesn't get much better than this. We are 4 days out from round one of the NFL draft. Will Joe Douglas run up the card on tight end at 10? Will he play it safe, go O line, try to build it? Will he trade up? Will he trade down? Will he stay at 10? I don't know. My guest is Jet X Factor's film analyst, Joe Blewett. Let's roll.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Here we go. Here we are, Sunday evening, talking draft. Like I said, 4 days out from round one of the NFL draft. And my guest, when it comes to breaking down film, evaluating prospects, it doesn't get much better than this. Jet X Factor's Joe Blewett joins the show. Joe, how are you doing today?
I am eager for the draft to come. We got 4 days and about, 57 minutes. Couldn't come faster.
Yeah, I'm hoping especially where the Jets stand this year at pick 10, I think it's going to be hard for them to mess up pick 10. As you know, the Jets can do some wild things when it comes to the NFL draft. As we saw last year, they select Will McDonald at 15 overall. So, just hoping we don't take like a Jared Verse or a Dallas Turner at 10, huh?
Yeah, or Byron Murphy, something
Yeah.
that can completely come from left field. I didn't do a lot of draft prep last year because I thought that first was going to go for Rodgers. So when I was sitting there and it's Will McDonald, I had no idea, So,
Yeah.
Now, will that happen? Hopefully not, but there is a world where it does happen. Let's just hope we don't live in that world.
Yeah, I just, again, hope that doesn't happen. Speak that into existence. Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo is another one. I'm just praying the Jets don't go with him. So, we're sitting at pick 10 right now. You've been obviously everywhere on the Jet X Factor YouTube channel, whether it's your 2-hour Blewett Blitz film review every Friday, just your overall film reviews, which are on the Jet X Factor YouTube channel, and also Jet X Factor app and website. You've made appearances on Cool Your Jets podcast, the Scoreboard podcast. So where do you sit right now? Obviously, we can go in a lot of different directions. You've done reviews on Neighbors, Alt, and obviously those are names that right now the Jets would probably need to trade up for to get. They're probably not going to be there at pick 10. And then you've also done reviews on guys like Tylise Fuaga, Troy Fontenot, who, they're going to be there at 10, and they might be there as well if the Jets trade down a couple spots. So where do you stand right now in terms of staying, moving up, moving down?
Yeah, I'm firmly, and I'm sure we'll have a long form conversation about it, but I'm firmly in the camp of trading up to get your guy. I think the best case scenario for you at 10, if you aren't to trade up, it is Odunze falling. If I had to bet, it probably doesn't happen, but I think there is a world where he could fall. It just depended on the Jets and if they're willing to wait out, teams like Chicago at 9, for a guy like Odunze. So I'm in the mode where I'm hoping for Odunze at 10 or a trade up. Obviously the trade up comes first. So I get building the depth of the offensive line. I'm sure we'll get into that. But overall, again, in an AFC, when you have guys like Lamar Jackson, when you have guys like Patrick Mahomes, you may need that extra piece on offense to push you over the top. And I think a guy like Neighbors or a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. can really take this offense to the next level. Whereas a tackle at this point could raise the floor of the team. That's fine. And maybe they could even start, but I don't see the drastic difference between a guy like, let's say, Fatano in year one and John Simpson, or a guy like Fashanu and David Bakhtiari, or Fashanu and a guy like Donovan Smith. I get that they could be better players in the future, but for rookies, specifically talking about just this year, that receiver really raises the ceiling, and this may be the only year where you really legitimately have a shot to win that Super Bowl. So.
Yeah, obviously we sit right now at pick 10, and for Odunze, I'm looking, and I think he could be there possibly in that 8 area, and it would probably take. Rich Cimini had a conversation with Will Parkinson on Turn on the Jets podcast, and it would probably take, he said, both of our 4th round picks to move up 2 picks and get Odunze. And personally, I would do that. I'm a big Odunze guy. A lot of people have differing opinions. Obviously you have J.C. Latham, I think, as your offensive tackle too, and a lot of people either are with you, they love Latham, or they don't like Latham. A lot of people have different opinions, but I personally like Odunze more than Neighbors. His size profile. I know you did a whole film review
Yeah.
on how size really doesn't matter a ton, but I like that big body type of guy.
Yeah.
Go up and get jump balls. I mean, if you put like Garrett in the slot paired with another guy, and then Williams and Odunze on the outside, I think that's a really nice kind of
Mhm.
set up for the offense, and then defenses have to worry about Brees Hall. But in terms of trading up, I would love to trade up and get a Harrison. I think it would be a little pricey, but we're gonna go to the first question, and it actually does involve trading up. Oscar says, Joe, I want to trade the farm to move up for Harrison. I feel like with all of these high level players going for second round picks and everything, it may not cost as much as we think. Let's do it.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that I think it does cost next year's first, most likely, to move up from Marvin Harrison. Now, if it costs less, obviously great, but and I know it will hurt to not have that first round pick next year. But at the end of the day, again, ultimate goal: if we win that Super Bowl next year, we really don't care
Yeah.
about that pick. Like, yeah, it'll hurt a little bit during draft time and stuff like that, but I'll trade the next 10 first round draft picks if you can guarantee me a Super Bowl
Yeah.
this year. So, a guy like Marvin Harrison, if he is what people say he is, and I watched him a little bit, but I would do a full blown review if he actually got drafted. But if he is Jamar Chase, if he is one of these Julio Jones type players, and you add that to Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, Mike Williams, like, you're talking about, again, a Super Bowl level, not only defense that's going to be top 3 level, but Marvin Harrison Jr., Neighbors, those type of guys, if they're going to be legit, players in year one, you're talking about what could be a top 5 to 10 offense if we stay healthy. Now, again, the draft doesn't end in the offseason. We have 3 more months to sign Bakhtiari's and Donovan Smiths and all these running backs. So it's not like, hey, well, Joe wants to trade up for the receiver. What are we doing? Are you confident in Max Mitchell or Carter Warren? Absolutely not. Bring in Bakhtiari and Donovan Smith. I don't care. So I'm definitely in the camp of getting that receiver because it raises the ceiling of the team. And now, in terms of, I guess you asked about Odunze a little bit, or you mentioned Odunze a little bit in terms of his size. Size matters if you use it well.
Yeah.
I think people overrate size in the red zone and just accumulate or just kind of relate. Okay, well, he's big. Oh, that means he's a jump ball guy in the red zone. It doesn't necessarily correlate if you're not a jump ball guy. If you don't attack the ball, if you don't have good body control, if you don't have strong hands to pull the ball away from defenders, those type of things. Think of a la Stephen Hill. Tall, not the best, red zone guy. So Odunze uses his size pretty well. I want him to be a little bit more physical in some of his route stems and little things like that. But overall, ridiculous contested catcher, absolutely absurdly ridiculous. And on top of it, he's a pretty good yak guy. Rodgers likes guys who can get yak. And he's also a guy who throws a lot of back shoulder fade balls and things like that. And if you're talking about just a jump ball basketball type of lineup, I'm not saying the Jets are going to have the best trio of receivers in the NFL. I'm not going there yet. But in terms of a jump ball type of receiving group, Mike Williams and Odunze, I don't know if there's a group out there in the NFL better than just those two. Unless you're talking like maybe T. Higgins and Chase or something like that. But you're talking about a top 3 group in terms of appealing to Aaron Rodgers' strengths. So I would, if it's a 4th round pick to move up, 2 spots, I'm more than willing to do it. People get attached to picks. That 4th round pick could be Carter Warren. That 30th overall pick, that 32nd overall pick, hopefully could be Kyle Wilson. It could be a bunch of busts we've had. Like, win me the damn Super Bowl. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've been saying it for a long time. I want a win now player. That's why I like Bowers. He fits the win now formula. He's a guy that can come in and be a weapon. And, Jake, I don't know if it was on his show earlier today that I was listening to, or on a show with you yesterday. He said if the Jets draft Brock Bowers at 10, he wants him. No excuses to have the same numbers as Sam Laporta did last year, who was a 4th round pick, I believe. And I think a tight end at 10 is risky, but I think he's more than a tight end. I think he's a pass catcher. He lines up in the backfield. He's a blocker. So I am a fan of Bowers, but the going all in for the Super Bowl, I like that idea, but not to the point where I'm mortgaging like our entire future. Like, I don't want to go to that plan where it was like what the Rams did. They went all in extreme, where they gave up all of their picks. They won that Super Bowl, whether it was bringing in Von Miller, Odell Beckham. And, look at them now. They snuck into the playoffs last year, but they're not going to go anywhere anytime soon. They got lucky on Puka Nacua in the 5th round. I mean, whoever saw that.
Exactly.
So, if it's next year's first, and do you think it would take next year's first and a second to move up for Harrison?
No, if it, and again, I don't know, because it's all different and depends on like what other teams are trying to trade up. If another team is trying to trade up from 13, 15, 18, 25, whatever it is to get a quarterback, that team is more likely going to be willing to give up a lot more than the Jets are for a receiver. So it kind of depends on the exact situation. But my feeling is it would be just next year's first, and we'd be able to get up. If it costs a little bit more, if it's like a 4th round pick, something like that, okay, am I going to lose Marvin Harrison Jr. for a 4th round pick? No. And then in terms of Ram, it's actually a really good point too. And another way to look at it, it's like, those Rams teams, they mortgage the future for like a 1 year kind of run with those type of players, with the Von Millers. If you get Marvin Harrison Jr. in here, he could be a stud for the next 10 years. You're building your team for the long term. It's not like you're trading that 1st round pick for a guy who's, 32 years old or something like that. So, again, Marvin Harrison, if he is Jamar Chase, I'm willing to get, like, would you give up right now, pick 10 in next year's first for Jamar Chase? I would. So if you think that guy's going to be that good, then do it. And obviously there's no guarantee. But still, it's a risk that I'm typically not willing to take because the Jets have been so bad. But in a year or two where we're trying to get it all and get that Super Bowl ring, I think it's worth the risk.
I really do think it's worth the risk, and I couldn't agree with you more on that take. Just because when Aaron Rodgers retires in 2-3 years, whenever it is, this team is not done winning. I mean, they have Quinnen Williams, they have Quincy Williams, they have Garrett Wilson, they have Sauce, they have Brees, they have Jermaine. Just because their quarterback's done does not mean that this team is done. I just hope though we can find a quarterback, and that's why I'm all for drafting like on day 3 of the draft, a developmental type guy like a Jordan Travis. Why not? It can't hurt. You just run up the card on a guy like that in the 4th round, and maybe he'll have him learn behind one of the greatest to ever play football. I mean, that really can't hurt. But I agree with what you're saying. Don't go all in like the Rams. But I'm definitely all for trading up. If they were to trade up, how high would you feel comfortable with them trading up? Would you feel 2? Would it be 5? Where would you feel comfortable?
I guess the highest point you have to get is probably the Cardinals at 4, right? Now they could be sitting there and say like, hey, listen, we have Kyler Murray, we're not trading. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. is that next dude. Like we're not going to give or we're not going to try to trade that pick. Now 5 is maybe it's a quarterback at that pick. I'm not exactly sure if JJ McCarthy's going to as high as some people think he is. I think he probably does go top 10. So if you can't get 4 and the Cardinals are saying, hey, we're not gonna take it, then try to get up to like 6 for Neighbors. That's something I am also, willing to do. And Neighbors would probably cost you less, from 4 to 6. Maybe Neighbors cost you a 2nd and one of the 4th round picks this year. And again, for a guy in Neighbors, who I think in most draft classes is receiver 1. And I know people kind of have like trouble with this stuff just because they're like, oh my God, Garrett Wilson was such a stud in college. Garrett Wilson was a good player in college. He was not Neighbors level in college. Now I'm not going to bet that Neighbors is better. He's going to be better than Garrett Wilson because Garrett Wilson's already like a top 15 receiver in the NFL. So I don't want to take that leap yet. But in terms of just comparing collegiate prospects, Neighbors is above where Garrett Wilson was coming out. So if you can add again, even just maybe a step down from Marvin Harrison Jr., but still a bona fide stud in Neighbors, again, more than willing to do it for a 2nd and a 4th round pick. And listen, 4th round picks, the percentage of them hitting is like probably like 20%. And most of those 20% is like a decent role player. It's not like you're getting a lot of studs. Now you could, but realistically, it's a shot in the dark. So if I can guarantee myself a good player in the spot that the Jets only need to fill legitimately one massive hole in the team, fill it with the best value you can or the best quality you can.
Yeah, so you mentioned trading up for Neighbors there. And I know you've mentioned about, and I agree with you, going kind of all in if we were to trade up and go out and get a weapon, kind of like a Neighbors or a Harrison type guy, even trading up 2 or so picks for an Odunze guy. So I'm looking in the top 10 right now, and I see the Titans at pick 7, and I'm looking and I basically see Joe Wald as a lock there. If the Titans are maybe looking to shop that pick, would you be interested in trading up to there if the Jets really, really liked Alt, or are you still just trying to stay in that wide receiver weapon direction?
Yeah, I could tell you, and this is a little bit spicy. You said before that Latham's my 2. Latham is my tackle 1 in this class, and Alt is my 2. Yeah, if they were to trade up for Alt, that's one of the situations on draft day I would come on my stream and be pretty pissed. I think Alt is a fun player, but he is getting overrated to me just because I think he's pretty technically savvy. I think he's going to be fine in year 1, relatively fine. I do think he's going to have a problem with power at the NFL level, and I think his ceiling is relatively low. I think he's a relatively high high floor. I think he's going to be a solid NFL player, or at least a decent NFL player, but I don't see him being some like absolute stud. And if you're going to try to trade up for a guy, you'd hope that he at least has that ceiling. So yeah, a trade up for Joe Alt on draft day would be legitimately one of my worst case scenarios. At that point, I'd much rather trade up for Odunze. And again, it's a thing where Alt will play, 35, 30, 40% of the reps, something like that. Again, a guy like an Odunze is going to play 70, 75% of the reps. And that's not even assuming that, Garrett Wilson, knock on wood, doesn't go down. Mike Williams, how does he start the season? Does he have a setback? You don't really know. And then let's say if you do have a Mike Williams injury and it's Garrett Wilson and what? Like there's legitimately nothing past them. I know that people want to have high hopes for Brownlee, Gibson, all that stuff. That's because we're Jets fans. We know those names. Realistically, to every other NFL fan, they're Jags. Nobody knows who they are for a reason. They're not saying they can't be anything, but right now they're nothing. So, yeah, it's I'm not trading up for Alt in any world. There's not that much of a gap between him and I get people who have him 1 and Latham and Fatanu and Fashanu for me to trade up for him. But there's a big difference between receiver 3 and Brian Thomas or Xavier Worthy. So
now if there's the chance that the Titans, they obviously people are looking. A lot of people see that as a lock at pick 7. Let's say that the Titans pass on him, and let's say the Falcons go with Odunze. The Jets don't make a move. Maybe the Bears take a pass rusher, Jared Verse, someone like that. Would you be disappointed in Alt at 10, or how would you feel if the Jets selected him at 10?
Yeah, no, not disappointed at all. Again, and there's ranges, right, for like being happy. Just because I'd say I don't want a guy at 10 doesn't mean I hate him at 15. Same thing happened with Jermaine Johnson a couple of years ago. I brought that up before. It's like, oh, Joe hates Jermaine Johnson. Like, no, Joe didn't want Jermaine Johnson at 4 or 10. At 27, 26, whatever it was, like I was thrilled with Jermaine Johnson. Same thing with Bowers. I don't like Bowers at 10. But if you fall into a situation where all the receivers are gone, maybe Alt is gone, and they picked Bowers over Latham, okay, I can live in that world. Like I get the upside pick with Bowers. I don't hate Bowers in any world. But in terms of Alt at 10, yeah, I'd be perfectly fine with him with Latham. Now if we're getting into like the Fuagas, Fatanus, I would be okay with it. I wouldn't be thrilled. I do think they both have some work to do. And I did watch Fatanu in passing while I was watching Odunze, so I didn't take a full blown review on him. So maybe I'd be a little bit more happy with the pick after I actually watched him like fully. But yeah, Alt or Latham at 10, I would be completely okay with. Again, it's the raising the floor move. And then on top of that, if you can supplement that with hey, we got Latham at 10. Let's say Alt goes somewhere else. It's Latham at 10. You get a receiver, whoever Connor likes at 72. Okay, whoever that receiver is, I don't delve into the late stuff yet because again, a lot of work for the actual Jets team and whatever. But whoever that receiver is at 72, okay, we grab him. Why can't we sign Tyler Boyd, who apparently got I think it was like a 2-year, $10 million offer, and you get a receiver in the 3rd round and Tyler Boyd for $6 million? Okay, like I could live with that lineup, especially if you have Alt or Latham at 10. Again, I think that's a little bit lower of the ceiling move, though. I don't think that you could replace a Harrison or a Neighbors with receiver 3 or receiver in the 3rd round and Taj Boyd. So. Or Tyler Boyd. I keep saying I would say Taj Boyd of Clemson back Rex Ryan's pick, but Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, so obviously we've talked about the Neighbors, the Harrisons, the Bowers, the bigger names. Like I want to focus more on like the smaller names. What if the Jets to select a Fatanu at 10? That opens the door for maybe a Brendan Rice at 72. Or if they were to trade back, and recoup a second. I like Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. I think he's a solid player. Or what are your thoughts on a guy like a Brian Thomas, who you could probably find if the Jets were maybe to trade back that far in the 18 to 20 area? The Steelers, Zach Rosenblatt had the Jets swapping picks with the Steelers in the 1st round and then some. How do you like a Brian Thomas type of guy?
Yeah, again, watching him in passing, I always want to be transparent with that stuff because I can completely change my opinion once I actually watch him. Not a guy I would be like thrilled up at 10, definitely. I think it's one of the bigger receivers. I think at 10 it would be quite the reach based on what I watched. He's a height, speed, weight type of guy who is very undefined, didn't really run a lot of routes at LSU, so he wasn't asked to do a ton. So I think he can come in and be pretty raw. And then you pair that with a guy in Aaron Rodgers who likes his receivers to know exactly what they're doing, not drop passes and all that. Like, is it a best fit with a raw receiver? I'm not so sure. Now, Xavier Worthy, obviously blazing speed. Can that open up the offense in terms of vertically? I think it could, So if you're telling me, like, again, gun to my head right now, like Worthy or Brian Thomas Jr. at 20, I might actually take Worthy over him. But that's also me saying that I don't know the backgrounds, right? Like there's some issues with Worthy, apparently, like his attitude and all that stuff, and he quits on routes and that stuff. So they could watch the film and say, no, like absolutely not. We're not taking this guy. He quits on routes. His interviews were terrible. Transparent, like we get like 30%, 40% of the information. There's a lot of information behind the scenes that we don't know, because I could think that this kid is great, and he walks in and he's a smug look on his face. He doesn't stand up to shake my hand, not looking me in the eyes, whatever it is that gives you some character red flags. There could be situations where that's happening and we don't know. But in terms of opening up this offense, like a new element to it, Worthy with that deep vertical speed, opening up the underneath for Garrett, I can see that. But it'd have to be in a significant trade down, because based on what I've seen from those guys, I'd rather at that point just take the Fatanus, Fuagas, or something like that. So it depends on how far you trade down for those guys.
Yeah, I can't see the Jets selecting a Brian Thomas Jr. at pick 10 overall. And someone who was talked about, obviously us Jets fans, we like to start talking draft early. The second we're eliminated from playoff contention, we start the draft talk. And obviously after that, Dolphins Black Friday, and then the Texans win, and then the 30-0 debacle really officially eliminated us from the playoffs. And that's when I started digging into some guys. And then obviously after the season ended, Mobile happened, Senior Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we really found a guy like Talise Fuaga, who had just a great game in Mobile practice.
Mm-hmm.
He looked great. And there were talks about him at the time going at pick 10 to the Jets. And honestly, if the Jets sit at pick 10 right now and select Talise Fuaga, I'd honestly be a little disappointed. I wouldn't want to see him. I wouldn't want to see the Jets select him at pick 10. I could see him as a trade down option. Same with a guy like Fashanu and Latham. At first, I was one of those. I made the lazy comparison. I compared Latham to Mekhi Becton before I even really started watching him, and then I noticed, I'm like, okay, this guy's really solid. And I know Dom C was on board with you on that Latham train. I know he was not a fan of the comparison to Mekhi Becton, but I like Latham. Would I be very happy with him at pick 10? I'd be modest. I wouldn't be going crazy, and I wouldn't be sad. I think it would be a solid pick, but in a trade back to the 13-14 area with the Raiders or the Broncos, I'd love a Latham pick. But pick 10, I definitely wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't be disappointed like you said you would if the Jets traded up 3 picks and went and got Joe Alt. So if they take him at 10, it's definitely not a bad pick by Joe Douglas, in my opinion. I don't think fans would react to it like the Jet fans did to Will McDonald, but I don't think it would be the exciting pick. I know a lot of Jet fans are split on building the offensive line and going out and getting a weapon. And right now, I'm team go out and get a weapon, trade up, trade down, whatever it takes. Plug someone in who can win you a Super Bowl. But I asked this question to Antoine Staley of the New York Daily News yesterday, and I'm going to ask it to you. What's a position room in this class that you look at and you say, this is a sneaky need for the Jets, and I really like the talent in this room?
Yeah. Now, in terms of for the draft, what position late do I like or anything like that I think that they should grab? I don't know, because I haven't looked it up enough. Again, I'll always be transparent. Now, in terms of what they need, that's a little bit underrated right now. So you kind of just mentioned it. Typically Jets fans, and this year's been a little bit later, but we're talking about the draft September 21st, because after the first 2 weeks of the season, we're oh nope, we've seen this before. The season's going to be terrible. Let's look into the draft. So we've talked about this roster for hours and hours and hours. So is there anything really truly hidden? Probably not. I think 3 positions that past offensive line, everybody's been talking about it. We've talked about safety, right? I don't think that the addition of Ashton Davis should preclude them from signing a third safety. I think he's a good special teamer. But if you told me right now that Chuck Clark went down for the season, are we okay with Ashton Davis as a backup? Me personally, I'm not. So I would say safety. I would say running back 2 is a need at this point, because you never know. Breece Hall can go down, and Izzy didn't have really an opportunity to prove anything last year, but he didn't prove anything last year. So I'm not pouring all my stock into a Super Bowl roster with a running back 2 who has really not seen many NFL reps and didn't show me much. And then past that, I could see defensive tackle, being a need, because they don't really have guys under contract next to Quinn Williams next year. And I know something that Dom C, you mentioned him, what he's been on is corners.
Yep.
Reed is gone next year. Carter is gone, at least as of right now. Carter's gone next year. Eccles' contract is running out. So could you draft a corner in the 4th round who you really like to develop? So I would say like probably safety and running back. We've talked about those a lot, but maybe the sneaky one is corner because of the contracts. Now, in terms of Latham, I definitely appreciate that you could say that, hey, at first I did not really watch the guy and I kind of fell into the lazy narrative because not a lot of people could do that, Connor. So for however old you are, congratulations, because that's awesome to be able to admit that legitimately. I think what happens is people start they kind of roll with the tides. Fuaga was the hot flavor of the month and everybody was excited about him at 10. And then it was Fatanu. Everybody's excited about him at 10. And then you know what's happening. Everybody's watching the college football playoffs and everybody sees JC Latham get blown up on one play that actually wasn't even that bad. And then now Latham's fat and he's terrible because of legitimately one play. And that's what drives me crazy when people don't really watch and they're just going to say that, and you can tell right off the jump when people don't watch, because if they say, oh, his game was bad against Michigan, you did not watch. You didn't watch. It was one play. So, Latham at 10, it's almost, and I agree with you, it's almost like, it's like, okay, like, great. I feel good about the depth of the offensive line, but you're not like excited. It's almost like being a homeowner and you'll figure out eventually, Connor, it's like, you're not buying the new truck. You're replacing the roof and the furnace, it's like, it's the kind of the things you got to do, but they're not like the sexy moves where Marvin Harrison Jr. is a brand new Corvette in your driveway type of deal. Yeah. So yeah, I would be okay. I would be happy with Latham at 10 because I like him a lot more than other people, but I just don't think it raises the ceiling of the offense very much. And again, in the AFC nowadays, you need some absolute studs to go through. Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrows, Mahomes. Obviously the Bills would be like 6 and 11. They're not going to be in the picture, but probably not. Probably not. They'll probably have like 8 or 9, maybe 10 wins. But it's the smart move. It's not the sexy move. But in terms of Latham, okay, I'm fine with that. At 10. Fuaga, I'm with you. I'd be pretty disappointed at 10 just because I think he's more of a guard at the NFL level. I think he could play tackle, but if I had to bet, my stake on everything, is he going to end up being a guard or a tackle at the NFL level? I think he should be a guard. Now, with that being said, it all depends on what team you go to, right? Like teams can jack up players. Ike Ekwonu was something I really liked coming out of college.
And where is he now? Exactly.
Yeah, but he was a situation where I said, hey, you should try him at tackle, but he would be an elite guard. He might not work out at tackle, but at least you have a backup of a guard. I think not the same player, but similar thing with Fuaga. Try him at tackle, and I think Icky probably had a better chance to survive at tackle. But try him at tackle. If he fails, okay, move him to guard. And the problem is though, I guess the Jets do have a long-term guard need at left guard with Simpson, so I guess that could work out. But I just think his ceiling at tackle is pretty limited due to his limited athleticism. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna touch on a few things there. First, with the drafting the offensive tackle, of course that was a need. I mean, before the season even ended. I mean, just the different combinations. That number was absolutely crazy. And then signing Moses, signing William Smith, signing Simpson kind of opened the door for flexibility at 10. And this kind of brings me back to the 2020 NFL draft where the Jets select Mekhi Becton. I believe it was 17th overall. It might have been. I could be wrong, but I believe it was
Becton. Becton was 10 or 11.
10 or 11. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's okay.
I don't know why I had 17 in my mind, but the Jets had several different options there when it came to offensive players. Becton was there, who they ended up selecting. There was also CeeDee Lamb, who, looking back, I did like CeeDee Lamb, but I thought offensive line was a big need at that time. So I was like, okay, Becton was fine. And then obviously the second round of that draft, the Jets select Denzel Mims. And at the time, I was a huge fan of that pick. Yeah. And then obviously that never panned out. So a lot of it, you mentioned Ike Ekwonu. Jake Asman talks about it a ton. A lot of people were so big, can't miss on Ekwonu. And then look, the Jets select Sauce Gardner, and Sauce Gardner is already a top corner in the league who's probably going to command around $25 million a year, if not more, when he becomes a free agent, and he needs to get paid. So, I look at these draft picks, and I look at them as lottery picks. You look at guys, and a lot of them you could see have talent. Like you mentioned Neighbors, you mentioned Harrison. Harrison is a ton of talent. I mean, you you take watch 10 plays of him, and you can already see, okay, this guy is a solid player. And then same with some of the quarterbacks, but the quarterback class is a little intriguing just based on the guys who have injuries. Like Penix, I think is very solid, for example, but the injuries is what scares me. He reminds me of like a Tua kind of the way he plays when it comes to mobile size, everything. But team weapon at 10 all the way. So are you like who's a name that you like maybe in the fourth round? I know we talked about
Yeah.
positions. Who's a name that you like in the fourth round? And one more thing before we get to that, I saw you mentioned the safeties. Ashton, I wanted to bring back. I thought he needed to be back, but I can't imagine him being a 1 or 2 guy. He's a guy that I like in the locker room. I think he's a good special teamer. He can make solid plays. It kind of reminds me of when the Jets were signed back Braxton Berrios a couple years back. Like that's a name that fans like him. He'll go out and make a solid player too. But I don't feel comfortable with him in the safety 2 role. I like if the Jets were gonna take a safety early, round 3, with their second pick in the draft, I like Jaden Hicks. Zach Rosenblatt had the Jets selecting him. Safety out of Washington State. I think he's a really, really solid player. I think Len Zierlein of NFL Network described him as a tone-setting player. So, I like that someone who's going to try to knock the ball loose. But what's a name that you like in the fourth round? Any position. It could be maybe like an Audric Estime, Jordan Travis, offense, defense. What's a name that you like?
Yeah. So again, I legitimately have not watched stuff in the third or fourth round. So let's say who Connor likes, and I like Hicks. I like that safety. I was talking a little bit before. It's just a thing where, and like it's funny too, because I'm like doing these reviews, and people are like, oh, you haven't watched 3 seasons of Brock Bowers? Like, what are you doing? Full-time job, wife, newborn, and I think I've done 30 reviews so far that I have cooked up. So I don't look into the third and fourth round guys just because it's a thing where, in terms of managing my time, I can't look into these guys because I tend to do full-blown evaluations. I just kind of told you each player probably takes me anywhere from 10 to, some players can take me 30 hours to do in terms of the entire time it takes me to evaluate a player. So when you're talking about 150 prospects, if I want to keep my job, I just can't do it. So for those third and fourth round guys, it's something that I do not know about. So I don't like to speak about things I don't know about. Now, it's a thing where I'm always willing to come back on the show. And if we draft some people in the third or fourth round, I'll tell you exactly how I feel about them. And that's some areas where I've caught a little bit of heat. It's like, obviously as soon as the Jets sign a guy, draft a guy, everybody wants you to kind of, for lack of a better term, blow smoke up their bum. I don't do that, so we can talk about those players later on. But in terms of, you kind of mentioned the draft with Becton and CeeDee Lamb, and that's a situation where I think it's like a little bit different in terms of the weapon versus the offensive line thing, because that was a year, I don't remember exactly who the tackles were that the Jets had. I think at that point we signed George Fant, I think, to be the left tackle.
George Fant, and then that was like the Greg Van Roten kind of days. I think Connor McGovern might have been just kind of coming into the Jets, and then 2020 we know Braden Mann lost us Trevor Lawrence the next year.
Yeah, and I'm not sure who they had at right tackle that year, but like that's a year where, okay, I understand building the offensive line, and even if, like, listen, at the end of the day, today's NFL, offensive line, tackle, and receiver, they're both just as valuable. Like, even receiver might not even be as valuable or even more valuable than tackle in the NFL, and just in terms of the salaries that these guys are commanding. And that's like part of the problem. You talk about the weapon thing, you talk about, Bowers versus the receiver. Bowers is already going to get a top 10 contract in terms of the money he's making, whereas Odunze, whatever it is, $5-6 million, that's a bottom tier NFL receiver, like a starting receiver. So in terms of bang for your buck, Bowers has to be good, where if Odunze is just okay in terms of his salary, like that kind of makes sense. But in those years, in what we drafted back in COVID year, that was 2020, that was a year we were expecting to be kind of bad, and we didn't have Tyron Smith, we didn't have Morgan Moses. So I think it's a little bit different this year in terms of getting that weapon, because we have tackles, and again, I understand building for the future, but it's a thing where you can supplement the roster this year with vets, and one situation smart, one gives you, again, I think the better chance to win a Super Bowl. And if it can greaten my chances from 20% to 22% taking that receiver, and then give me the 22% chance. Like, I know it's not the smartest long-term building thing, but realistically, I know you said that the Jets will hopefully be competing for a long time. Realistically, teams' Super Bowl windows are relatively short. The Jets have a 41-year-old quarterback. It's 2 years, and then we'll see what happens in the future, but you never know when you can be back in this position again. So.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you're saying on how it's different than that the scenario in 2020 when they really weren't that good and there was no hope really on that team, and they knew obviously Adam Gase came in, we knew they weren't going to be great. But let's get into some questions in the chat. Andrew's asking, you guys think Zach gets traded for third day for a sixth or a pick swap?
I hope so. Right now they can clear. Is it? I think I misspoke the other day on Jake's show. I think it's $5 million they can clear. Maybe it's 10. Maybe it's 10. I think the full contract is 10. If they trade him, they can get rid of the 10. I think that's what I said, but I felt like that was a little bit high, but maybe it is 10. Is it a thing where I think a team is going to just straight up, trade for Zach Wilson and take on a $10 million contract? No. Is it a thing where like I would be willing to trade, hey, Zach Wilson and a 6th round pick for a team's 7th to get rid of his contract money? I would do that. And I know people are going to say like, that's crazy, just keep him at that point. If you can get another $10 million on this team, think about it. Like you're talking about, let's just say they do go, I don't know, let's say they do go receiver. You're talking about Bakhtiari, maybe Donovan Smith, and like a running back too, for the price of just trading, down from a 6th to a 7th. Like if they could package a pick to get rid of Wilson's salary and just kind of just be done with it, just be done with that entire thing. Then I'll be willing to do it. Oh, another point I want to bring up from before that you kind of mentioned, Denzel Mims. And that's kind of just like a little, like, and that's a sneak peek into, and this is how, like, this is how at least I think, I'm not saying you should think like this, but like, it's a sneak peek in terms of like, you don't know the guy's mental, Denzel Mims, elite athlete at the school, dominating all this stuff, comes in solid rookie year. And then, oh my God, they bring in Keelan Cole and like Elijah Moore, and then he gets all down on himself and then he doesn't perform. Like, we don't know guys' mentals, and I know he had bad salmon. That salmon did not affect him for 3 years. Like let's be realistic about it. So I think Denzel Mims, and speaking relatively here from my downstairs, Denzel Mims in the NFL, I think he was a little bit soft mentally, and he couldn't handle adversity. And then he kind of, for all of his talent, he's a talented player. And where is he now? So there are things that we just do not know and that they know when they interview these guys. So that's why NFL draft is such a tricky process, because you don't know, Connor, you could be a great hardworking kid and then $3 million drops in your lap. Like, I don't got to work that hard. You don't know guys' motivations, stuff like that, unless you can hopefully kind of, get into their mind. And it's hard to do, especially for us who can listen to like 5-minute clips or 10-minute interviews of these guys. And all of the interviews are all stock answers. They're all kind of stupid. And like, I get people like listening to player interviews and stuff, but you're not really getting anything from them. Like if you're listening to any players, it's ex-players who will drop some nuggets, but players all say the same stuff. Yes, I want to be here. This is a great situation. I love New York. It's all the same stuff. So you don't really know. So it's an interesting part of the process for sure.
Yeah, I spoke to Adam Schefter of ESPN, I'd say about a week ago, and he told me that if he expects he expects the Jets to get rid of Zach Wilson no matter what. And the interview I had with him was right after Woody Johnson's comments at the owners' meetings when he was like, "If we can't trade him, we are gonna keep him." And I asked Schefter about that, and he said he does not see any chance that Zach is on this team for 2024. He thinks he's either traded or cut.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rich Cimini obviously put out a story earlier today, where it said about they're just looking for a team that will eat most of his salary. And that's all I really care about. Get as much of the salary as you can off your plate. I don't care if we literally get a bag of footballs for him. Anything is good for Zach at this point. So we did expect him off this team, but he said it might look like a scenario if we were to trade him where we would have to give up Zach and a pick to earn a pick. So I found that interesting. I definitely do it, but we have a caller on the line, and the caller on the line actually spoke to WFAN's Keith McPherson on a draft prospect the Jets were interested in, Knoble out of college. We have Bobby joining the show.
Yep.
Bobby, how you doing tonight?
Yesterday, right, Joe?
What's going on, Bobby?
Remember yesterday you heard that? I called up about Knoble.
Yep, I heard it both on Jake's show where he replayed it, and then I got some rumblings of it in my stream, and then I saw it on Twitter as well. So I definitely checked it out.
I wasn't finished with that. I called ESPN yesterday, and I also called WFAN today, Mark Malusis.
Did you get any of them? Did you get any of them or no?
I think Dan, I got X Jake. I think I got Dan on ESPN, but I don't know if I got Mark Malusis. He never heard of the guy. So
I think you got ESPN. No, you definitely did because Jake put it in the Discord and I listened to it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think. You sure you don't think Aaron Rodgers has to get protection?
Yeah, it's again, it's not a thing where he doesn't have to get protection. It's more about, there's different ways of getting said protection, right? Like I said to Connor before, it's not like the draft ends on April 27th. So what is the true difference? And you have to consider, like, these guys coming to the NFL, especially in collegiate offenses, like they're not taking true vertical sets. They're not doing a lot of things you're doing at the NFL level. So it takes a little bit of time to develop into an NFL tackle. So in terms of year one, this year going for the Super Bowl, what's the difference between a Fatanu and a David Bakhtiari if you're able to land him? If anything, Bakhtiari is better than Fatanu just for this individual year. Or
doesn't he get hurt a lot though?
He does. I think he's played like 6 games in the last year. But if you're not confident with that, Bobby, guess what? Hey, sign Donovan Smith too. Like there's no, we could sign multiple guys, so if you're not comfortable with the Bakhtiari and you think he gets a little bit too injured, then sign Donovan Smith, who maybe has a little bit lower of a ceiling, or be a little bit more risky, younger guy, I believe, like Cam Fleming, sign him as well. Like you could sign 2 guys, typically teams have 10 offensive linemen. So you could stock up with 5 tackles, unless you, Bobby or Connor, you guys tell me if you guys are so attached to Max Mitchell, I'm fine with cutting him, and bringing in Donovan Smith.
Like you said, the wide receiver you want, he might be very good for the team too, because if the other guy goes down, Mike Williams, you don't have anybody behind him, or the other guy, Wilson. So, Joe, you think Connor is a very smart kid?
I do. And Connor, Connor is one of the few that can admit that he was wrong on something, which I actually appreciate.
Yeah, but he's like only, how old are you, Connor? 14?
I'm 12.
He's 12. Listen to this kid. The stuff that comes. I didn't even know anything about football. I knew football, but not the stuff he knows.
Yeah, it's impressive for sure.
Back then, we didn't have computers and all that, but this kid is smart. I love this kid. I hope he gets monetized. I want to give him money because he deserves it. And Joe, you're a good guy. I didn't know you. I thought he was only like 21, Connor. He's 31. And he's a cop too. My cousin's a cop in New York.
Okay, yeah, I'm in Jersey and Monmouth County. I've been doing it. I'm like on my 4th year now. So
New York?
I'm sure if you said a name, I can maybe I recognize it. But
John Dios. You know what John Dios?
No, I don't.
Yeah, he's from. Well, he does a different kind of cop. He does the one that you go to domestic.
Oh, well, no. I do that as well. We do everything. So domestics is
too? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. And then do you like Blue Bloods? I just wanted to know if you like Blue Bloods.
Is that a show?
Yeah, that's a show.
Yeah, I could tell you just because of it's my profession, so I know exactly what goes down. Watching shows where they screw stuff up, it really bothers me. Like watching these shows where they arrest somebody and they read them their Miranda rights immediately. That's so unnecessary. That doesn't happen in real life. So there's just so many things on these shows that I can't. It'll boil my blood because I know that it's just false. And I like to detach from work after work. Like I rather go and watch Game of Thrones.
And Connie, you lucky you got to talk to Marty Lyons. You lucky dog.
I did. Marty's a great guy. I also got to talk to Wesley Walker, who played on.
Yeah, him too.
Yeah.
Did I tell you the story about me and my brother on the elevator?
Yeah, I know. And you mentioned Gastineau. Pros up to Gastineau. Gastineau was supposed to do a signing at Hofstra today, and he made it there, and they had to call an ambulance. They don't know what happened, but they had to call an ambulance on him.
Oh, no. Poor Gastineau. Oh,
yeah, I know he's...
You are awesome.
Thank you.
A+. When is your next live show? I'll be on. I know you have school now.
Yeah, so I'm off Tuesday for Passover. I'll have a show Tuesday, and then Wednesday I'm on with Rich Samini.
Oh, okay, Rich Samini. He's good.
Yeah, I appreciate the call, Bobby.
Joe, who's your next show you're going to? Is he on YouTube too? I don't hear him.
Yeah, Joe, I think we...
I muted. I cough button myself. If I'm going to Dom C's channel within the next 15 minutes, actually. So if you go to Project Prospect, yeah, I'll be on there in about. Yep.
And you going kind of too?
No, I'm not going, but I will definitely be listening to two of the best when it comes to drafts. But Bobby, appreciate the call. See you soon. Thank you. Really appreciate it. But I
Mhm.
think we'll end it with that. So Joe, thank you for joining us. You got any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm excited for the draft. We are now whatever 24 times 4, 24, 24 times 4 days, whatever we're doing the math here. I don't know. It's about what 80 something hours from the draft. We're under 100, I believe. I'm just so excited to see it all be over, and the conversations, and the mock drafts, and the trade downs, the trade ups. The only thing, and I think I was asked this question, like who I would be repulsed at 10. And it's not even the prospect. It's really not. Again, I think Bowers, it could be a good tight end in some sort of fashion, but the discourse after the Bowers pick and the fighting between Jets fans, I cannot deal with, because you know what it is. People like to put words in people's mouths. I'm unfortunately too busy to be on Twitter arguing for 3 hours with people, so I just don't respond to people typically. I'll just mute you or block you, especially if you put words in my mouth. But yeah, so that's the pick I'm nervous about. And again, I think he could be a stud. I just really, I don't like arguing with people. Like, it's so stupid. Like, why can't we just all, have like, again, it's white or black. There's no gray area between these guys. It's either you absolutely love Bowers and you're going to be, streaking around your street after he's picked and screaming for joy, like I was when they picked Sauce that one year, or you absolutely hate him and he's not a draftable prospect. It's like, no, I'm kind of in the gray area. I think he has a really high upside, but I also think there's quite a few questions about his 2023 film. So that's the one pick that I'll be like excited about it, like internally myself, but I know like Twitter Joe's gonna have to deal with all of that crap, and YouTube Joe, like when I'm in those realms, I'm gonna have to deal with all the Bowers discourse. I almost just kind of want to completely avoid it at this point. So that's the one thing I'm a little bit nervous for, but about 100 hours away from the draft, we're going to figure out exactly what happens. I'll be on a stream, usually hang out with my buddies that night. So I'll be on the stream like second half of the draft. Friday night, I'll be streaming as well. I think Saturday I'm jumping on with Ryan, and then past that, Joe RB31 on Twitter, Blewett Splits for all the really in-depth film reviews. I know it's not for some people, but if you're trying to really learn your players on your team, then that's where you're going to go, hopefully.
I agree. Appreciate everyone watching. As always, JTS, Jets, Jets, Jets.